There's a moment in life when something changes. It's not a loud noise or a landmark event. It's silent, like an invisible curtain falling from your eyes, and you finally see the stage behind the show. Alan Watts called this waking up from the collective dream. And when you wake up, when you really wake up, the world doesn't look the same anymore. The colors seem fake. The conversations sound empty. And that comforting feeling of belonging to something simply disappears. You look around and realize you're alone in a crowd of people sleeping with their eyes open. The problem isn't that the world changed. The world always was like this. The problem is that you changed. And there's no undo button. You can't go back to sleep when you've already seen you were dreaming. It's like watching a movie knowing the ending. Impossible to get emotional the same way. And the more you see, the heavier it gets to keep pretending everything's fine. Alan Watts said we all wear masks. Social masks that we put on in the morning along with our clothes. The problem starts when we forget we're wearing a mask. When we believe that the character we play at work, in the family, on social media, is who we really are. Society as a whole has become a big theater where everyone's acting, but nobody admits they're on stage. You wake up to this and start seeing the masks everywhere. You see your boss wearing the mask of authority. Your friends wearing the mask of perfect happiness. Strangers on the street wearing the mask of someone who knows exactly what they're doing in life. And the worst part is they believe their own masks. They take the character so seriously they become prisoners of it. You try to take off your mask, show who you really are, but that scares people. Because when you stop performing, others realize they're acting too. And that bothers them. Nobody wants to be reminded they're in a theater. So they look at you weird, call you strange, ask you to go back to your role. And there you are, without a mask in a world of actors, not knowing how to fit into this game of make-believe anymore. Watts had an idea that messes up everything they taught us. He said the ego, this I that you protect and defend so much, is an illusion. There's no real boundary between you and the rest of the universe. You're not in the world. You are the world. But all of society functions by pretending otherwise. It builds invisible walls between people and then sells the illusion of connection. Everyone living like isolated islands, competing, accumulating, protecting their little imaginary territory. You wake up to this truth and everything seems absurd. You see people fighting over boundaries that don't exist, defending manufactured identities, dying of loneliness while carrying this fantasy of separation. It's like watching someone dying of thirst in front of a river because they believe the water belongs to someone else. The ego isn't the villain, it's just a giant misunderstanding. But this misunderstanding built empires, religions, wars, and all human suffering. And when you try to explain this to someone, you realize there are no words. Because we're so used to living as separate egos that the truth sounds like madness. So you stop trying. You carry this knowledge alone. You observe the game of false identities without being able to participate in it with the same innocence as before. We live in a world of symbols that we confuse with reality. Money is paper or numbers on a screen. But we treat it like it's more real than trees, than water, than the time of our lives. Watts explained this simply. We confuse the map with the territory, the finger pointing at the moon with the moon itself. We spend our entire lives chasing symbols and forget to live. You wake up and see this madness everywhere. People destroying their health for money they'll use to try to recover their health. Destroying the real planet to accumulate abstract wealth. Trading years of life for numbers in a bank account they can't take anywhere. And when you try to show this, they look at you like you're naive. Like you don't understand how the world works. But you understand perfectly. You just realized it's an invented world. A game where everyone agreed to pretend that pieces of paper have supreme value. And once you see the game, you can't play it seriously anymore. But you also can't leave it completely. You need money to survive in this system. So you're stuck between two worlds. Knowing it's absurd but forced to participate. It's like being forced to use play money knowing it's play money, but everyone around you takes it as life or death. Our culture has a strange disease. Nobody lives in the present. Everyone's always somewhere in the future. Kids study to pass the year. Teenagers study to get into college. Young adults study to get a job. Adults work to one day retire. And retirees wait. Wait for what? Nobody knows. Life becomes an eternal preparation for something that never arrives. Watts saw this as tragedy. We spend our entire existence postponing really living, always saying we'll enjoy it later, after we get that job, after we buy that house, after the kids grow up, after we retire. Later. Always later. You wake up and realize you're surrounded by ghosts, people who aren't really here. They're always a few years ahead, living in an imaginary future. Their minds are in 2030, in 2040, on a day that might never happen. And today slips through their fingers without being lived. You try to live now, be present, enjoy this exact moment. But that makes you strange. People don't understand someone who's not obsessed with plans, goals, with building a better future. They call you irresponsible, short-sighted, because we learned that living now is wrong, that there's only value in tomorrow. So there you are, one of the few people actually alive in the present, surrounded by people obsessed with a future that only exists as thought. Watts had a curious view of the universe. He said all of this is the cosmos playing hide-and-seek with itself. The universe divided itself into billions of parts, and each part pretends it's separate from the others. Each person is the entire universe hiding behind a mask, pretending to be just a small, limited individual. And awakening is when the universe starts recognizing itself through you. It's when the mask slips and you remember you always were everything. But here's the problem. You wake up and realize this. You look around and see you're the universe looking at itself through billions of eyes. But the others are still hidden. They still deeply believe they're just a body, a mind, a separate person. And you can't force them to wake up. You can't rip the blindfold off anyone's eyes. They need to discover it themselves. So there you are, a part of the cosmos that remembered who it is, surrounded by parts that are still deeply lost in the game. It's a strange loneliness, because you're not really alone. You are everything. But at the same time, you're isolated in this perception. Like being the only player in a video game who discovered they're in a video game while all the other characters still believe that's the only possible reality. Western society is addicted to a drug called progress. Always improve, always evolve, always conquer more. It's never enough. You're never good enough. You never have enough. You always need to develop, grow, reach the next level. It's an infinite treadmill that leads nowhere. Watts warned about this. He said we turned life into an obsessive journey with no real destination. A progress that has no end because there's no arrival. You wake up and see people running frantically. Where to? Nobody knows. But everyone runs. And whoever stops is considered a loser. Whoever questions where we're going is seen as lazy. Society created a giant collective anxiety because nobody ever reaches enough. There's always something missing. There's always one more step. And when you climb one step, they put 10 more in front of you. You try to leave this race. Try to simply be instead of always becoming. But that scares people. They bombard you with questions. What are your goals? Where do you want to get to? What are you going to do with your life? As if existing wasn't enough. As if you needed to justify your presence on the planet with constant achievements and improvements. And when you don't have an answer, when you say you just want to live, they look at you with pity, like you've given up. But you haven't given up. You just stopped running on a treadmill that leads nowhere. The educational system should expand minds, but it does the opposite. It takes curious children, full of questions, and transforms them into empty containers to pour information into. Watts criticized this harshly. He said education became packaging, putting data in children's heads like someone filling a suitcase. And the natural curiosity, that sparkle in the eyes, slowly dies, replaced by obedience and memorization. You wake up and realize you spent years in a mind-formatting machine. You learn to think inside boxes, to follow rules without questioning, to repeat correct answers instead of asking interesting questions. And you look around and see the same thing happening to each new generation. Vibrant children entering the system, coming out years later as faded copies of each other, all thinking alike, all wanting the same things, all afraid to step out of line. And when you try to really learn, when you seek real knowledge outside the boxes, you realize how much was stolen from you, how many years wasted memorizing useless things while important questions were never asked. You see the system for what it is, a factory of obedient workers, not free thinkers. And that hurts. because you know your mind could have been so much more, and all those young minds around could be too. But they're being systematically pruned to fit into narrow molds. Humanity created a problem that doesn't exist, and now suffers trying to solve it. What's the meaning of life? Watts laughed at this question. He said it's like asking what's the meaning of music. Music has no meaning outside itself. You don't listen to a symphony to get to the end. You listen because the act of listening is already complete. Life is the same. It doesn't need external meaning. It simply is. But our culture created an artificial existential crisis. It convinced everyone they need to find a purpose, a mission, a reason to be here. And then it sells millions of books, courses, and religions promising to deliver that meaning. You wake up and see the trap. You see people tormented searching for an answer to a meaningless question. Spending their entire lives on an impossible quest because they're chasing something that doesn't exist. And when you stop searching, when you simply accept that life doesn't need justification, people see you as a nihilist, like you've lost hope. But it's the opposite. You found freedom. The freedom to live without needing to validate your existence with some grand cosmic purpose. But trying to explain this is useless, because existential pain has become identity. People cling to their suffering of not knowing why they exist. And there you are, free from a prison that everyone around still calls home. Watts used a beautiful metaphor. He said life is dancing, not a journey. You don't dance to get somewhere. You dance because dancing is already the goal. But we turned everything into a path with a destination. Work isn't for working, it's to get a promotion. Relationships aren't for relating, they're to get to marriage. Even fun became achievement. How many places did you visit? How many experiences did you collect? Our culture forgot how to dance. Everyone marches. Marches toward objectives, goals, achievements, milestones. Like life was a to-do list to complete. You wake up and realize the absurdity. You see people so obsessed with arriving they forget to be. They travel and only think about the next trip. They eat and already plan the next meal. They live relationships thinking about the next step. They're never where they are. Always going somewhere. You try to dance. Simply do things for the pleasure of doing them, with no goal beyond the act itself. And that confuses people. They ask you what the goal of what you're doing is. You say it has no goal, that you're just dancing. And they look at you like something's missing in you, like it's pathetic to do things without productive purpose. So you dance alone in a room full of people marching. And they see you as lazy, because you stopped chasing imaginary destinations. Modern human beings have a sick obsession with control. They want to control the weather inside their house. Control what they eat with laboratory precision. Control every moment of the future with detailed plans. Control even their own emotions like they're defects to fix. Watts taught that control is the greatest illusion. You don't even control the next thought that's going to appear in your head. How are you going to control the universe? But all of society functions on this fantasy. We sell insurance, plans, guarantees, protocols, all to create the illusion that we're in control. And the more we try to control, the more anxious we get. Because deep down, we know we don't control anything. You wake up to this and see the collective panic. People desperately trying to hold life with their hands. Planning every detail. Creating plan B, C, and D. And when something goes off script, they collapse. Because they built their entire life on sand. On the lie that they can control the uncontrollable. You let go. Accept that you're surfing a wave you didn't choose. And that gives you peace. But it also isolates you. Because everyone around is still clinging to the fantasy of control. They call you irresponsible. Say you need to plan more, prepare more, have more security. But you already know security is impossible. That life is fundamentally uncertain. And trying to control chaos only generates more internal chaos. There's a silent conspiracy. The conspiracy of seriousness. Everyone agreed to treat life like something solemn. A serious problem that needs to be solved with a closed face and heavy responsibility. Watts was against this. He said existence is fundamentally a game. Cosmic play. The universe isn't trying to get anywhere. It's just playing with itself. But we forgot how to play. We turned everything into serious tasks. Work is serious. Relationships are serious. Even fun became serious, with people competing to see who has more fun. You wake up and see how heavy everything got. People carrying existence like a burden, without lightness, without spontaneity, without that silly laugh of someone who got the cosmic joke. You try to bring lightness, laugh at the absurd, not take everything so seriously, and they accuse you of being immature, of not having a sense of the gravity of life, of escaping responsibilities. But you're not escaping. You're just refusing to participate in the conspiracy that turned existing into punishment. Watts said if God exists, he must have a sense of humor. How could he not, creating such an absurd universe? But we humans completely lost our sense of humor about ourselves, and anyone who laughs at universal seriousness becomes an enemy. There's a strange division everyone accepted. On one side, you. On the other, the world. Observer and observed. Subject and object. Person and environment. Watts said this division is artificial. We created an imaginary separation and then suffer from alienation. You're not observing your life from outside. You are your life. There's no separate self from experiences. But we live like ghosts, watching our own lives like they're movies, commenting about ourselves in third person, judging our actions like we're someone else. It's madness disguised as normalcy. You wake up and realize you're whole, that there's no observer hidden inside your head watching everything. Experience and experiencer are one. But trying to live like this, without this division, is almost impossible in a society of ghosts. Everyone around lives disconnected from themselves. They talk about themselves like they talk about strangers. They fight with themselves, hate themselves, criticize themselves, like they were two different people locked in a war, and you see clearly they're fighting shadows. That the division is imaginary, but you can't show this, because internal alienation is so ingrained that any suggestion of integration sounds like existential threat. The market discovered the biggest possible business: selling impossible solutions. Watts had a perfect metaphor for this. He said trying to use the mind to improve the mind is like trying to bite your own teeth. It simply doesn't work. But the self-help industry ignores this. It sells books teaching your mind to fix your mind. Productivity courses for minds anxious about productivity. Relaxation techniques that make you anxious if you don't relax right. It's an impossible loop. You wake up and see the trap. You see people buying course after course, book after book, technique after technique, always trying to fix themselves, always failing because they're trying to do the impossible. You can't step outside yourself to observe and improve yourself. It's like trying to lift yourself up by pulling your own shoelaces. It simply doesn't work like that. But telling this to someone invested in this quest is useless. They believe the next method will work, that they'll finally hack their own mind and reach the perfect version of themselves. And an entire industry profits from this impossible quest, selling ladders to heaven. And people buy them, climb a few steps, fall, and buy another ladder, eternally. Watts wrote a book called The Wisdom of Insecurity. The idea is simple, but revolutionary. The more you seek total security, the more insecure you become. Because absolute security is impossible. Life is fundamentally uncertain. You can have the best insurance, the biggest assets, all the guarantees in the world, and still not control anything. An accident, an illness, any chance event, and everything collapses. But our society sells security like it's possible to achieve it. Banks sell financial security. Medicines sell health security. Relationships sell emotional security. And the more we buy, the more paranoid we become. Because deep down, we know it's a lie. You wake up and accept insecurity. You understand that walking over an abyss without a safety net isn't terror, it's the human condition. And that frees you. But it also separates you. Because everyone around is still buying false securities, paying fortunes for illusions, building paper fortresses against the inevitable. And when you stop seeking security, they see you as crazy, like someone who gave up. But you didn't give up. You just stopped fighting against the basic fact that nothing is guaranteed. And there's peace in that. A peace that those still seeking impossible security will never understand. There's a taboo nobody can talk about. Watts called it the supreme taboo. The truth we can't admit. You're not a small individual in a giant universe. You are the entire universe expressing itself as an individual. But this truth needs to remain hidden. Because if everyone knew, the entire system would collapse. All control structures depend on you feeling small, separate, powerless. They depend on you not knowing who you really are. Religion tells you you're a sinner needing salvation. Government tells you you're a citizen needing protection. The market tells you you're a consumer needing products. They all want you small, fragmented, needy. If you discovered you're everything, that you always were everything, you wouldn't need any of this. You wake up to this truth and understand why it's kept secret. You understand why people who speak this are marginalized, ridiculed, or ignored, because it's the most dangerous truth possible for control systems, and you carry this alone, because speaking it sounds like megalomania. Saying you're the universe seems like delusions of grandeur. So you stay silent. You know who you are, but have to pretend you're just a small individual, to not scare people, to not be excluded. And this is perhaps the deepest loneliness. Knowing your true nature but having to hide it to function in a world that needs you to remain ignorant of it. Here's the last paradox, the most complicated one. Even awakening can become a new ego game. You can wake up and then create an identity of an awakened person. Feel superior to those who sleep. Transform enlightenment into a new mask. Watts warned about this. He said there's no destination to reach. There's no point where you're finally awake and it's over. Because even seeking awakening is ego trying to improve itself. It's the mind trying to bite its own teeth again. What's left then? Simply see the game. Not to leave it, because there's no outside. But to dance consciously. You're not better than anyone for seeing the game. You're just seeing. And tomorrow you might forget again. You might go back to taking everything seriously. And that's okay. Enduring this world awake isn't about escaping. It's not about being special or enlightened. It's simply about recognizing the dance for what it is. And keep dancing. Sometimes with grace, sometimes stumbling, but always knowing it's a dance. Not a serious mission. Not a journey to somewhere. Just a dance with no reason beyond dancing. The weight you feel won't go away. That's the honest truth. Once you wake up, you carry this vision forever. Some days, it'll be lighter. Other days, it'll be almost unbearable. But Watts left a gift. The idea that even this suffering of seeing is part of the dance. The universe is experiencing consciousness through you. Experiencing what it's like to wake up inside a sleeping world. And that has value. Not a value you need to prove or justify, but intrinsic value. You're alive, conscious, seeing. And that, even being difficult, is extraordinary. Maybe the way isn't to endure this world. Maybe it's learning to love it exactly as it is, with all its illusion, all its theater, all its organized madness, because that's also part of the cosmic dance. And you, seeing all of this, are still dancing. If this video touched something in you, if you recognize this loneliness of being awake, leave your like. And subscribe to the channel. Because here we keep exploring these truths that most people prefer not to see. You're not alone in this strange dance.